Welcome to Your Unique Brilliance podcast with Nicola, bringing you a weekly fresh flow of guidance, inspirations, powerful tips, and conversations designed to help you create your vision, discover your greatest diamond potential, and begin living the life you want. This is about empowering your truth, your choice, and your voice. Hello, and welcome back to Your Unique Brilliance podcast with me, Nicola Salter. And today I'm very excited to introduce you to Susan Gold. Susan has just launched her recent book, Toxic Family, Transforming Childhood Trauma into Adult Freedom. And she is turning the standard paradigm on its head, courageously leading others through her own journey of abuse, addiction, and surviving narcissism, all while creating a distinctly empowering personal and professional life. Welcome, Susan.
Nicola, it's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. You're going to be sharing with us some very personal details from your life and also professionally where you are now. And you have a very inspiring story, and I'm very excited to share your story with all our listeners today. Now, just to give everyone quick background on Susan professionally, Susan became known for attaching celebrity talent to projects in New York, which led her to produce for television and film. And then she moved on to Los Angeles. She convinced a modern art legend, Andy Warhol, no less, to do an on-camera commercial for Pontiac. And she also helped launch Fox News Channel at the request of Chair Roger Ailes. And on behalf of the Disney Channel, persuaded A-list celebrities, including Ben Stiller, Jack Black, Taylor Swift, David Beckham, and more, to be interviewed by cartoon characters Phineas and Ferb. Wow, that must have been quite fun doing that.
It was really fun. I mean, I just thought the premise was so funny when I heard it. I was like, seriously, I'm going to convince these people to be interviewed by cartoon characters? Okay, then.
Yeah, and you did it. And you then went on to create your own consulting firm as well, which we'll talk about in a little while. Your background has been very varied. You're also an athlete, an amazing athlete, actually, by all accounts. Do you want to share some of that with us too, in terms of your athleticism?
Yeah, I think to keep the stress at bay, I first started with long distance running, which I really treasured, but there were so many injuries, I mushroomed it out into 3 sports. I thought that would make sense to spread it out. Swim, bike, run. I was a triathlete for a long time. And then focused it all into adult masters swimming. And within 4 years, had a national ranking.
Oh my gosh. How did you find time to do all of this? You're amazing.
I got up very early.
I was gonna say, I can just get up at 5:30, and that's a push for me. You must have been getting up at 3 or 4 to do all of this.
Yeah, it was between there. Yeah, it was quite early.
Uh-huh. Well, let's dive in. In terms of your background, your story, I would love for you to share with us as we begin by exploring your work as you jumped into New York, as you stepped into the work environment. There were some things that came up that a lot of women are now experiencing, even with the Me Too movement. Would you mind starting there for us?
Not at all. I just was really privileged. I worked at a large global talent agency called ICM. And the agent I worked with went off and formed his own agency and asked me to join him. And I was thrilled to do it because you couldn't learn anything at these big agencies. All the doors would close when the negotiations went on. I really learned so much from him, but he had an addiction. He had a sexual addiction and would invite young actresses in the afternoon and ask me to leave. It was quite awkward. And I was making money on the side as a personal trainer, believe it or not. And Barbara Walters was my client. I had dreamed of her. I used to watch her on my beanbag chair in my belly in the basement growing up. And I said, I'm going to go to New York City and be like Barbara Walters.
That's amazing. Amazing that she was your client. Okay, so you're a personal trainer on the side.
Yeah, and I rang her bell one morning at 7 a.m. for our session, and she took one look at me and said, Susan, get in here. What's going on? And she was a great interviewer for a reason. She got it out of me within minutes that I had been sexually harassed. I was chased around the office, and my boss tried to grab at my crotch. I'll just be literal. I'm not going to hold back
Wow. No, no,
anything.
no, no, it's fine.
And I was mortified. And Barbara said, I'm coming in with you this morning. We're going to confront this gentleman together. I
Good grief.
said, Barbara, I'll handle it. It's
Yeah.
okay. So I did. I confronted him that day and he said, do you have everything you need? And I said, I do. And he said, great, you're fired. I think I had maybe 2.5 months of earnings in the bank. I was newly sober.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that was one of the remnants of my past that I
Mm-hmm.
carried with me and had to clean up.
Mm.
And I had extricated myself from an abusive relationship where the gentleman held the purse strings, I'm ashamed to say, but that was the truth. And I was terrified I would go back into that relationship. So I was determined to make every effort for this talent brokerage firm I set up to work, and somehow was introduced to Donny Deutsch, who's an entrepreneur and a cultural icon. He's a television host now, but back then he was running his dad's ad agency. And he asked me, do you think you could get Andy Warhol to endorse the Pontiac dealers that I have? And I said, I'll give it a whirl. Let me try. And when I couldn't get anybody to pick up the phone at the factory, I took the subway down from the Upper West Side to Murray Hill, where his brownstone was, and
Uh-huh.
rapped on the door. And Fred, Andy's business manager, answered and looked at me through those horn-rimmed spectacles.
Mhm.
And I explained why I was there. And he said, oh, well, come back this time tomorrow and I'll let you talk to Andy. So I showed up and sat in the foyer, sweating bullets,
Yeah.
and then double doors opened, and there was a darkened studio and a pin spotlight on platinum hair going every which way.
Yeah.
And there was Andy scribbling, coloring
Mm.
intensely with colored pencils. But what I really noticed, Nicola, were the three pugs running around the studio. And that's all Andy cared about. I was yammering on about why I was there. He made no eye contact.
Mm.
It was so intimidating. And
Absolutely.
then finally, I quieted and looked up and made eye contact. And he said, now, really, why should I do this? And I just paused for a moment and the words came up and out of my mouth, because you can have the pugs in the shot with you.
Praying that that would happen.
Yeah, I had no
Amazing.
idea. Yeah.
Flying by the seat of your pants. And this is how you started your talent agency.
Yeah, that was the first deal, and that made a name for myself. And I just went on doing the same. And then somehow Roger Ailes got wind of it. He had his own network at the time. He was running CNBC and had a network called America's Talking. He wanted celebrities to brand the
Mm-hmm.
network and add weight, and I couldn't get anybody. Oh my gosh, no one. So one night I had the genius idea. I'm going to grab a cameraman. We're going to go to a red carpet event, and I'm going to interview the celebrities there about the event and the cause. And then I'm going to have them look straight to camera, tell me who they are, and they're watching, the network. And this was before all that
Yeah.
promo stuff had been going on, but I was desperate. Well, oh my gosh, Nicola, it worked.
It worked.
I think it was a Tuesday morning, and the head of promotions who I was working with yells out, "Gold, get in here." Like, oh gosh, what did I do now? He's like, sit down. Mr. Ailes needs to see you up in his office right away. He's
Mm-hmm.
very impressed with this celebrity campaign you've done. Like, okay. So I went up and was ushered in by Roger's assistant.
Mm.
And I was sitting on a couch, and Roger was behind a desk across the room. And any couch and room and a closed door with a man, I started sweating under my armpits. I knew
Yeah.
there'd be more to the picture. And he gave me the oddest interview.
Mm.
First was very appreciative of my capability, but then started asking me questions about my family. Where did they live? How close was I with them? How involved was I? What was my lifestyle in the city? And I just thought, this is odd. But the interview was finally done. Well, years later, my college boyfriend, who had had a stint at CNN and then went on to Fox News Channel
Mm.
after, um, said to me, "Did you read the article in the New Yorker?" I'm like, "No, what article?" "Oh, about Roger, because he was being fired for sexual harassment." There was a big expose, and I read that piece, and the chills went up my spine.
Yeah.
That interview he gave me was the same interview he
On
gave each of his victims. But he never, never tried anything physically
mm-hmm.
on me. And I always had great respect for him. He invited me to help launch Fox News Channel. It was an amazing
That was
experience.
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing experience. He was a true leader.
True leader, but such an unfortunate downside. You know, why these men do these things is just beyond me. They're power hungry, ego. And thank goodness that you didn't pass his test. Thank
Yes.
goodness. It would have been a whole nother story. And that you were already anticipating. I probably bet he was already knowing that you were anticipating what was coming, and he could sense it from you. And this, even though there's the Me Too movement going on, let me just jump in for a second, because your story is extraordinary. I mean, already it's so rich. There's so much color here, and I'm sure as our listeners are tuning in, hearing you, just so impressed by what you've shared with us so far. Even now with the Me Too movement and what's been going on, it's being made disturbingly clear that sexual assault and harassment still persists through various American institutions, and like presents yet another set of obstacles for women's advancement at work, even though women are working very hard not to tolerate this kind of behavior anymore. And there's a lot more, laws out, like Title VII, I think it is, protects women in the workplace. But there's still studies that are carrying on that show, right, that 34% of female employees are still being sexually harassed by their colleagues. And we know that this kind of behavior can lead to depression for women, and it can create post-traumatic stress and burnout and long-term physical health issues because of this anticipation, this hypervigilance that we have in the workplace once this begins. And once we're experiencing this, I should say. And it can be also very subtle these days, as men are becoming more aware of their behaviors. They're becoming more subtle with it. How were you able to shift? I mean, you were very kind just now about Roger, and he was a true leader. And yet you'd been in this situation with him in that room. You discovered years later that that was his interview style for harassment, molestation, abuse, wherever that goes. And then, of course, you had left your other job because of sexual harassment and being grabbed at. How were you able to shift these emotions for yourself back in that time?
It's a long process, and it's been a
Yeah.
long process, but I knew intuitively I couldn't eat the rat poison and expect that person to drop over.
Mm.
Plus, the more I thought about hanging on to it, the more it ate at my own being at a cellular level. So I knew I had to step up and out in order to
Mm-hmm.
thrive. And somehow each time I've done that, and at different levels, varying both professionally and personally,
Mm.
it's served to open doors that are so glorious and so profound that I'm living more from a heavenly place on earth than that place of PTSD and waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah, and that fear base. So, what would you suggest to women who may be experiencing some of this now, in these times in the workplace, even though there's more protection, more laws? What would you suggest to anyone who's listening right now who's experiencing similar issues, who are afraid, basically, of speaking up?
Yeah, there's a lot of fear around it, and it does take tremendous courage and strength to come forward. But that's just what I would do.
Mm-hmm.
Journal, document, become
Mm-hmm.
aware, and then find someone safe. It may be HR, it may be, a
Mm-hmm.
professional, it may be a colleague, it may be a friend, but you have to voice it because
Mm-hmm.
you don't need to handle this alone. It's very toxic, and it's very difficult to tease out the strands and
Mm.
believe in the reality of what is happening.
Right. And of course, and on the other side of this too, the person who's doing the harassment, of course, has some issues going on here, some deep embedded issues of needing to have that reward system and that addiction that they have and the impact they're making on someone else's life. So by speaking up, you're also somewhat helping the other person who's doing the harassing to identify what these emotional wounds are that they're going through and why they're having to do this in the first place. Hopefully maybe bringing more balance or even healing into their world. Not that you're here to be a savior or a therapist by any means, but speaking up can have a long-term impact on everyone.
Yeah, I agree. And healing all the way around.
Yeah, which is an ideal situation. I know that's not always the case or the situation, but you're right, having that courage to speak up and express yourself. And it brings up another topic of interest of mine, where I'm working with a lot of women who really have such an embedded fear of speaking up, a fear of breaking a relationship, for example. I'm not just speaking about injustice, but breaking up relationships, speaking up for their worth, speaking up for their value. There's such an indoctrinated culture within women that they find it so difficult. And even now, with all my training and what I've done in the last huge number of years, there are certain times when I find it difficult to speak up, and because there's this fear and I cannot identify what that fear is. It's just like this heavy cement that can sit in there, and you're like, oh, I can't say it. I can't say it. What do you think? What's your opinion about that? Where do you think that comes from?
So I'm going to get a little Southern California hooey on you, even
Let's
though I
do
live
it.
in Northwest Montana now. But for me, that gooey concrete fear is ancient. It's in my DNA. It's in my programming. It's in my lineage.
Yeah.
It's goes way back. I believe I came in with some of that programming. And then there's also the programming of our patriarchal society, our culture, our systems, our social systems.
Yeah.
That endorse that messaging. So I think that's starting to shift, but I think we have a long way to go to really raise that frequency.
I hear you. And breaking that, embedded DNA, ancestral training is something that doesn't happen overnight. And it's taking those small steps and to build your courage, to build your confidence on a daily basis. And maybe building that courage comes from doing something out of the box that's not your normal everyday occurrence. So, and it could be something really small. It could be creating a daily habit as going through for a walk every morning instead of driving straight in the car and driving to work. And you might say, well, that seems a bit simple. How's that going to help me speak up? But it's helping you to retrain your brain to a new habit. So picking something that's slightly different for you every day starts to break that chain of sometimes there's fear, that embedded ancestral behavior that you have, and those wounds. So picking a daily habit can help start moving, and of course, finding a therapist, finding a coach, working on those emotional wounds and where they come from, and really doing some self-reflective inner work to start breaking those barriers and blocks down, which you've been doing very naturally, because I want to dive into now your book based primarily on your childhood. Susan's book, Toxic Family, Transforming Childhood Trauma into Adult Freedom, just been launched. Beautiful read, very rich, deeply emotional, very intense at times. Some beautiful exercises, self-help exercises and methods at the back to support your growth. Really written from a place, unfortunately, of sadly experience that you've had, but then also how you've turned this around. And let's begin by jumping into what motivated you to write this book.
Well, first of all, thank you for the beautiful description. I'm really grateful and I'm moved, especially coming from you. I have tremendous respect. for your journey and your strength and what you're delivering. So
Yeah.
thank you. Um, I felt I needed to leave a legacy. I didn't think my story was that unique or special, but I did understand that I'd been through quite a bit of experience. And so I wanted to share it. I didn't want to leave the planet without it. And the walk has created a different way for me to view those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't see them now um, in the same light that I did even 20 years ago
Right.
walking through. Um, Toxic Family actually was my publisher's title. It was not my title.
Oh.
I felt it's been a magical illumination transforming childhood trauma into adult freedom because I feel I was placed so purposefully in the middle of those 5 children with a genius astrophysicist who was an alcoholic, a womanizer, and a narcissist, and a mother who was equally as genius, but saddled with 5 children before she was 30, soothing through food, and was treated with diet pills, which are speed or were speed
Yeah,
back then.
yeah,
So, and then I believe she also had mental health issues. She too, going back in the lineage, she was beaten by her father. He was beaten almost to the point of death and had psychotic episodes as a result. My mother never had treatment. She was expected to be silent and was molested by the parish priest. So here she comes and marries an alcoholic Peter Pan and has 5 kids to contend with. You know, so I have a tremendous amount of compassion. She was brutal. My father was fun,
Mm-hmm.
the big kid until his mask fell.
Yeah.
And I was really able to see that in my own adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
But standing back now, wow, what a profound gift of soul evolution.
Sure. But as you said, 20 years ago, you were seeing this differently. And of course, now I believe, and you talked about the California angle on, speak in terms of mental health and emotional wounds, that which is wonderful that we do have now this ability to understand and view things in a way that we didn't have those tools necessarily 20 years ago. 30 years ago, and certainly not when you were growing up. As you said in your book, you had no idea what was going on. It was so conflicting. You were learning from the age of 12 or 13 as you started to awaken what might be the case with your mother's personality and the way your father was. And the fact that they divorced and they came back together again, and you had to live again through that, just as you thought it was all finishing and there was space, back they came together again to continue their journey together, which was impacting you so negatively. There were no tools for you, and you were learning how to survive and navigate and create coping mechanisms to deal with these two very difficult personalities. What was just there were so many things that came up in your book. For you, though, in your mind, what stands out from your childhood as one of the most challenging traumatic experiences that occurred?
Just not knowing from one moment to the next what might happen, because my mother was exceptionally loving but could switch on a dime. I was very young, 4. She was giving us all baths in a very small, tightly spaced bathroom. The water was gray. It was halfway down the tub. I was so excited for my turn. I was getting squirmy. And she just grabbed my arm, and I still can sense her thumb going through my little bone. And she started to shake me, and she said, "Why are you so bad? You're so bad." Her eyes went into slits. She was gone. This wasn't my mommy. I felt hot. I saw brown. I saw stars. And then the next thing I remember was knowing this wasn't a safe place for me. My mommy wasn't safe. This was dangerous. So just not knowing at any moment.
And also that anticipation. And I remember you talking about your 13th birthday, where she put on a party for you, and then punished you for it.
Yeah, she immediately said, "You're going to be a problem now. You're a teenager," and beat me like
Mm-hmm.
out of nowhere. So it really eroded my sense of trust, my
Mm-hmm.
sense of self-esteem, my sense of worth and value, my ability to speak up, because I just, to that point, stayed numb,
Mm.
stayed mum,
Yeah.
tried to hide, be invisible, and be perfect. And I found myself doing that in the workplace and anticipate needs and deliver.
Mm-hmm.
So that was not helpful. To speak up and ask for what I deserved,
Mm-hmm.
almost just way too much to detonate.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, these, our brains get exposed as we're kids because the brains are developing into these experiences that we believe to be true, and we will do whatever we can to feel safe with our parents, and we will please them. We will anticipate their needs. And in the work that I do, and what I've learned is that children who've had to anticipate at an early age become extremely intuitive and also psychic as they get older, because they learn to anticipate, they learn to see what's coming down the line, because then they can prepare and then feel safe with that. On the other hand, that skill and gift that has been developed is quite an extraordinary gift that can be used in such a wonderful way to support clients and work colleagues, used in the right way, not draining us. Have you found that? Because you have a whole chapter on intuition in your book. Yeah.
Yeah. And as I've been doing the podcast, it's been recommended I write another book just on intuition. We'll see how
Yes.
that goes. I'll let you know. But
Yeah.
I was quite intuitive, highly empathic, and telepathic. I
Yeah.
could read the thoughts of adults, and I used it until it got dangerous because it started to fly out of my mouth what I was
Mm-hmm.
was hearing, and the adults didn't genuinely appreciate the truth being foisted upon them by a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
So, I put that away in a box for a long time, but I definitely used it off and on,
Mm-hmm.
um, to help me with the courage to move forward. I left that home the morning after I graduated from high school. It was 7:45 in the morning, and I knew I had to go, and I was terrified. But that little voice in me, that little light, said,
Mm-hmm.
"Yeah, you go. You're going to be okay."
Yeah, you're
It'll
going to be okay. And from your traumatic experiences at home, and moving forward, you mentioned earlier that you got sober. Was alcohol an addiction that you stepped into as a coping mechanism?
So I took a slug from the wine jug at work to ask for a raise. And that was a red flag. I'm like, something's wrong here. Also, my morals were slipping. The people I was associating with were becoming more seedy and fair weather. So it was easy to tell lies as opposed to the truth, when it would have
Mm.
been just as easy to tell the truth. And I needed to know there was going to be a margarita or a glass of wine or a vodka tonic wherever I was going to go with people. So I knew there was an issue. And luckily, I got help, and it was the right help. The gentleman immediately started talking about alcoholism. Was there alcoholism in my family? How much did I drink? And I said, "You must understand, I get happy when I drink." I had no clue. But yeah, I was 25 when I got sober, and I've
Oh,
stayed
wow.
sober.
Wow, that's wonderful. And the fact that you're able to overcome that too. With your parents, did you ever reconnect with them? Did you have the
Oh,
relationship with them?
I have, and I did. I took a 3-year hiatus with my mother because I would go back and visit and just come away suicidal. So
Mm.
I just had to put a stop in that until I could do some inner work and tease out the strands. My father, it's been off and on. And I moved ultimately to the other side of the country, to California from the East
Mhm.
Coast. So the engagement was rare, it wasn't often. But I was genuinely happy to see them when I did and could engage, but I had to watch my boundaries.
Yeah, I can certainly understand that. Now, as we're talking, we've all got wounds, emotional wounds, wounds from the past. And as people are listening in and hearing us talk about, really anticipating your parents' needs, trying to please, and then how this flowed into the workplace. You've got this book out there as an amazing tool based on your experiences through work, through your family, and your personal growth to support others in their journey. Where are you now with your work? And how have you crossed that bridge into this world?
Well, that intuitive voice called me to Montana, and the nature here is just expansive. So I've gotten much quieter. That central nervous system has, lowered in decibel. The book was published in March, and I'm still doing some work similar to what I had in consulting, but I'm transitioning into coaching other people, helping them through similar experiences that I've traversed. And that's my pleasure and my delight.
Yeah. And it's so natural for you, and you can really empathize and really align with the client's needs and be able to also offer solutions and directions and guidance that might support them.
Absolutely. And that little intuitive knowing is back in spades. So that helps too, like it does with you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That intuition is such a nugget of gold. Yes, there's some gold in the work that we do, because there is that sense of knowing. I mean, a sense of understanding, a sense of that energy there where you just feel you want to ask a question from that person, and perhaps you don't even know why you need to ask that question. And as you ask that question, the door opens, and then out comes all the information and the essence that wants to be shared and healed. So intuition in our line of work is so valuable. And I learned at an early age too, like you. I wasn't through a traumatic background like you, but my mother was blind, and growing up in that situation, learning to anticipate her needs, and how she was operating was something I learned at a very young age. And so it became something then that went too far as I got into my teens and my early years, and I've had to work on moderating it because it can be exhausting if you don't cap it. And pulling it back, though, to be able to anticipate somewhat without draining yourself is so important. And yes, this is what happens as we're growing up. These are the emotional wounds that can become gifts, just as you've seen.
Yeah. And listening to you just describe your little sojourn through that element of your life, it's so beautiful to listen to. For me, it's like such a privilege that you served in that way, you saw it, and then you realized that didn't work for you and you shifted. Like, how beautiful. And you became more expansive in your humanity and your compassion, not just for others, but compassion for Nicola, you.
Thank you. Thank you for seeing that. You are such a beautiful soul. I am really, really excited that you've moved into this arena, that you've honored your truth, and the journey that's brought you here, you've really you're owning it, stepping into it, and supporting others with this too, and helping them to overcome and work through trauma. I know that you have at the back of the book some great information, methods, exercises to use that you used for yourself during your journey. And there is in the epilogue one tiny paragraph that I highlighted because I really love this. It really stood out to me. But there's a lot in here, everyone, that stands out to you. It's like it's a beautiful tapestry of so many colors. You say in your epilogue, it's a refreshing place to be once you discover that you don't have to fix those you love to feel safe and valued. It's been a revelation to feel genuine compassion towards myself. It's almost like living in a new zip code. Amazing. Yes. Yeah. And I'd actually forgotten we'd highlighted that. And we've been talking about all this during the interview. And I was like, what was that piece I highlighted? And there it is. Intuition at play. Wonderful. Wonderful. But moving into just another piece about intuition, which I would like to share with everyone. It's exercise 3 in the book. And in chapter 3, you talk about intuition. And you say, when I was less consciously aware of being intuitive and didn't have experience and being judged for my ability, it was easier to accept and seem natural. Quickly, I hid my capability rather than risk being singled out. That's what I did too. And punished, which often came with my gift, when my gift was recognized. You ask everyone to write about a time you remember your intuition leading you to a simple knowing. So for everyone out there listening, write about a time you remember your intuition leading you to a simple knowing, something that you felt, gosh, that I feel this, I know this. Just become aware of when that was, because we all have intuition. So many of us have closed it down, but we all have it. And I think it's a wonderful, just one of the many exercises that you ask your readers to do. And you're very proactive in getting people to join in their self-discovery through these methods that you provide. Now, are you running workshops and retreats for this now? Is that something you're doing?
I am planning. That is coming in the future. I've been asked over and over, so I'm getting the message and it is coming.
Wonderful. Well, we are really excited to see that. And I want to make sure that everyone knows where to find you. What's your website, LinkedIn? What would you like to share with us today?
I'd love to just send everybody to susangold.us. It's all there.
susangold.us, susangold.us. And as we come to a close, Susan, what nugget of wisdom would you like to share with us today?
I would love everyone just to be kind to themselves. No, you've traversed so much. This earth is not for the faint of heart. It's a really tough schoolroom. And just know you're doing a beautiful job.
Being kind to yourself. Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you so much for your time. Beautiful soul. Done so much healing and you're supporting so many others. And thank you for bringing this book out and having the courage to write your story.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I'll see you soon.
Thank you for listening to Your Unique Brilliance podcast. And if you want to define your brilliance and redefine your diamond potential, schedule a personal consultation with me to discover just how you can do that at nicolasalter.com. While you're there, make sure to subscribe to the show so you will never miss an episode. And if you found value in this show, I would appreciate a rating on iTunes or simply tell a friend. That would be amazing. You are amazing. Have an empowered week, everyone.